watching Reason and Theology Live. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
Welcome back, everybody. Reason and Theology, your host, Michael, here on a Wednesday evening, joined by Kevin Symonds. How are you, Kevin?
Doing all right. Just we had the water heater bust here in my apartment, so that has been quite the ordeal the past couple of days. There's water damage, so
saw that on Facebook. Yeah, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, well, thankfully they were very good. I have to say that the management was very good. They came down and they've got the new heater. I mean, they were very good. I'm very happy with the service, so to speak.
Awesome. Well, what we're doing is we're discussing Archbishop Vigano and also Our Lady of Fatima. Now, before we dive into the topic at hand, could you maybe just briefly for, new viewers and people who are new to the Catholic Church or maybe aren't Catholic at all, could you briefly tell us what exactly Our Lady of Fatima is before we dive in?
Sure. In 1917, between May and October of that year, the Virgin Mary appeared in a little village called Fatima in Portugal, and she appeared to three children, Jacinta and Francisco Marto, and their cousin Lucia dos Santos. And during the course of those 6 or so months, Our Lady had communicated information to the children. July of that month, of that sequence, tends to be the kind of the linchpin for that information. It's known as the Secret of Fatima, and that secret was divided into 3 parts: a vision of hell, the revelation of the devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and then an infamous third part that remained hidden and very secret until the year 2000, when it was finally published by the Holy See on June 26th of that year. And there's been a lot of debate over the years as to what it means, its interpretation. Did we get everything? All kinds of debate, and that's kind of been my bailiwick, I think is the expression. It's been my area of research for the past few years, is looking more deeply into these areas. And some of the questions that have come up, some conspiratorial, some not so conspiratorial, just to help us go deeper into the meaning of the third part of the secret a little bit more deeply.
Excellent. Now, how does this relate to Archbishop Vigano?
Well, Archbishop Vigano was the former papal nuncio to the United States. I can't remember the exact years he was the papal nuncio. I think he was in... That's right. It was October the 19th, 2011 until April 12th, 2016. I believe it was he reached the age of 75, and Pope Francis had accepted his resignation, I think pretty much immediately, if I remember correctly. And Vigano gets involved in Fatima because, 2 years after he had stepped down, he published a famous testimonianza, or a testimony, in which he made some very serious claims about sex abuse, clerical sex abuse in the church, and even up to and including the Holy Father himself. And he started talking about Fatima last year a little bit more, I think, than what he had in the past in a public forum. He gave 2 interviews in particular. One was to a Portuguese publication called Dies Irae, Day of Wrath, and then another one called LifeSite News. And I had some problems with some of his characterizations, or some of his understandings about Fatima and the third part of the secret. And so I had written an essay that eventually was published in the Revista Teologica di Lugano in their year 25, June 2020 edition, number 2. This is over in Europe. Lugano is in Switzerland. In which we just kind of look at it and say, hey, what are some of these issues here? What did he say? What was wrong about it? The essay is kind of compact. I couldn't say everything I think that could have been said. I only had 5 pages to work with, but it was peer double-blinded reviewed and by competent people over there in Lugano, and they liked it and said, yeah, we'd like to publish it. So it was a great honor, I must say. I was like, wow, this is so awesome. It was my first theological journal that I was published in over in Europe. So I was like, whoa. So it was a beautiful, beautiful honor. So I'd like to talk today a little bit more about some of the specifics, but not before explaining that Vigano has been making these statements for the past 3 years now, I think, He was originally supposed to go into hiding after the publication of his testimony in August of 2018, but he keeps making these statements. He keeps coming out. He just issued another one yesterday on the Great Reset, and I'm very concerned for His Excellency, and I'm hoping to just go a little more deeply into what the issues are and explain to people why some of the things that he said are just flat out questionable, if not just wrong.
Let's do it. Take it wherever you want to go.
All right. Well, I think people can get a general sense of Archbishop Vigano's his background just by going to the internet. I've already kind of given a basic idea of things with Fatima as well as his bio here. I wrote out some things, so I'll just kind of skip over some of this, but just to kind of back it up a little bit, I want to explain some of the details about Fatima, because it's going to have a huge role as we explain more about Vigano. So I mentioned that Our Lady communicated the secret to the three children in Fatima. The third part remained, it was written down in January of 1944, but it was sealed away in envelopes for many years. Nobody read it until 1959. It was opened by Pope St. John the 23rd in August of 1959. So, excuse me. So many speculations about this text that Sister Lucia had written had risen before the year 1960. And the 1960 date is because on the envelopes containing the secret, Sister Lucia had written that this can only be opened. She said, per ordine expressa di Nostra Signora, este envelope che suppose sia aperto a 1960, is the Portuguese. She says, by the express order of Our Lady, this envelope can only be opened by 1960, or in 1960, by the Cardinal Patriarch of Lisbon or by the Bishop of Leiria, meaning the Bishop of Fatima. Well, 1960 came and went. The document was not given to the public, and there was a huge outcry over this. So, in short, the speculations then arose before that year as well as after that year. And the third part was subjected to a lot of speculation, which contributed to a growing hype about the third part of the secret, as well as expectations about it. As I said earlier, the text was eventually published on June 26, 2000 by the Holy See during a press conference. And many people were disappointed, though, because the text did not quite meet the expectations that had arisen over the course of those many decades, since the year 1960 and arguably a little bit before. As a matter of fact, we just saw an example of this recently with Peter Kwasniewski. He recently made a statement about Fatima over on the Remnant newspaper, on their online edition at least, reviewing a book on Medjugorje. And he kind of indicated that he's kind of in this camp about this. And I'm kind of like, ay, Peter, what are you doing, buddy? Because I know Peter personally. I was like, Peter, what are you doing? We talked about these things. But yeah, it is what it is. So what happened then was that this text didn't meet the expectations of people. And it was, what was the text? It was revealed to be a vision about people being martyred for the sake of the gospel of Jesus Christ, or the sake of Jesus himself even, in fulfillment of a prophecy that we found in the second part of the secret, which is that Russia would spread her errors throughout the world. And these errors are generally understood to be the errors of communism. So things like atheism, materialism are two big ones that I kind of focus on. But I give these things not to say that these are the only ways to look at it, but just as a general beating pulse, if you will. So since the publication of this text 21 years ago, there have been many debates, even accusations against the church. And some have said that the Vatican is withholding a second text of the third part of the secret, which allegedly contains an explanation from Our Lady, a missing soundtrack, as one of these people put it, named Christopher Ferrara. So other people, however, argued that the Vatican's interpretation of the text is incorrect. So they believe that the text was integral or complete, but that the Vatican's interpretation was incorrect. So there's different debates that take place. So whatever the claim, whatever side you take on this matter, one fact is very apparent. The third part of the secret became a very contentious matter for a number of people. And there has been no end to the speculations. And unfortunately, now Archbishop Vigano, his remarks to Dies Irae, and arguably later to a couple months later to LifeSite News, were one more iteration of this rather sorry state of affairs. Having said that, then I kind of want to get a little bit more into the hermeneutics, or the hermeneutical question that I have with the Archbishop. So, as a former papal nuncio, Archbishop Vigano was very much privy to sensitive information. And this is not, you can't neglect this. This is an incredibly important point. When Vigano speaks, his credentials follow him. This is extremely important. So we have to ask an all-encompassing question. How should we read Vigano's remarks about Fatima? He came out and basically declared the fourth secret of Fatima to be a true thing. That's the issue. More about a little bit later. So should we read his remarks according to his credentials, or do we read his remarks as reflecting his personal opinions? That's a serious question that has to be resolved before any other discussion. And when Vigano provides us some answers, or some direction, I should say, on this question. In his interview with Dies Irae, he names Antonio Socci as one who had, as he said, thoroughly researched the third part of the Secret of Fatima. Now, that's an important clue. Socci had published a book, here's the Italian, Il quarto segreto di Fatima, the fourth secret of Fatima. This came out in 2006, although this is a later second edition. It was published in 2009, 2010, in English translation by Loretto Publications in New Hampshire, translated by Christopher Ferrara, as the fourth secret of Fatima. And basically, Socci is a respected Italian journalist and author. He had, when he published this book, it made headlines. I mean, headlines. I remember that time frame, 2006 to 2007. It was like all over the news practically. What Socci sought to address were various claims about the third part of the secret. Now, to his credit, Socci did note some demonstrably false claims. Unfortunately, he failed to be more critical with some other ones. So, for example, he supported the assertion that had been made for many, many years now that there was another text, the so-called fourth secret, that was 20 to 25 lines long, as opposed to the text that was published in 2000, which was over 60 lines. So I looked at this question myself in my book on the third part of the Secret of Fatima. I have a whole chapter on this, which I think is chapter 2. Yeah, chapter 2. Yeah, chapter 2, how many lines of text? And based upon that study that I did, I uncovered that this assertion of 20 to 25 lines of text was actually based upon a faulty interpretation of a French text by a guy named Frère Michel de la Sainte Trinité. Frère Michel did not claim that somebody told him it was 20 to 25 lines. This was pure speculation. I don't want to go on to the details because it'll just be it'll just bog us down. So I refer people to chapter 2 of my book. So just to speed along here rather hurriedly, acknowledging then that Socci failed to perform a more comprehensive study of the facts, was Vigano then correct to assert that Socci had thoroughly researched the third part of the secret? Perhaps not. And it appears that Vigano missed that memo, that, so to speak, my book, that is chapter 2 of my book. And unfortunately, this oversight damages his presentation in the publication Dies Irae, which was published in April, I think, of 2020, last year. He also, in addition to naming Sochi, he also singled out two particular cardinals, Angelo Cardinal Sedano and Tarcisio Bertone. And he singled them out, I think, for a number of different reasons. But among them, Sochi paints a very negative picture of these two cardinals, Sedano and Bertone. This picture is, of course, with respect to their involvement in the publication and interpretation of the third part of the Secret of Fatima, because they were intimately involved with that 21 years ago. There is, however, more in play on this matter than what is apparent at the surface level of Vigano's remarks. Remember earlier I mentioned his testimony, or testimonianza, in which he started talking about clerical sex abuse and things that he claimed to be aware of as his time as papal nuncio? Well, who do you think appears in that testimony but Cardinals Sedano and Bertone? Aha! We're seeing some connections here. He named Sedano and Bertone in his testimony, Vigano did, as being involved in covering up sexual abuse by clergy members. So there is history between Vigano and these two cardinals. And that fact cannot be omitted from a discussion on Vigano, Fatima, and what he said to Dies Irae. You can't separate that. It's just not possible. It would not be smart. So I'm going to point out the proverbial pink elephant in the room, therefore. Has Archbishop Vigano's personal belief in the corruption of Cardinals Sedano and Bertone inclined him to accept uncritically Sochi's remarks about these two cardinals in relation to Fatima? That's a key point. If we answer yes, then it is imperative to make a critical distinction. We have to separate, therefore, any negative disposition or antipathy that Vigano might have for Sedano and Bertone from any claims about Fatima that he presents to the public as being true. He would be, simply speaking, biased. And I know this is very strong stuff to be saying, and people would probably be viewing me as being very harsh against Vigano. And I'm sorry to say, but I think these things need to be said, because he's making some very irresponsible statements, as I'll get into a little bit more with respect to Fatima. I make no statement upon other things that he has said. I'm generally not competent to go into some of those areas. But he's been very imprudent about Fatima. So it becomes, therefore, necessary to separate fact from fiction. When we look at the Dies Irae interview, and I have it pulled up here. Let me can we do the share screen thingamabobber? Yeah. It is in Portuguese, but I will help with that. Okay. Just let me know how to do this. Do you have to do it, or do I do it?
You just do share at the bottom, share screen.
Share. Okay, I see. Okay. Share screen. Yeah, here we go.
All right. Now I have to put it on.
Okay. Yippee! All right. Is it showing?
Yep.
Okay, good. I don't. Whatever. Okay. This is they've changed their format, but this is from what it was last year. But this is the interview, and so it's April 21st, 2020. So last year, and there's His Excellency. So the bold text is the questions, and we can see here. We can see the Tercio Segredo, the third secret. So I see it right up front. So it begins with a question about Fatima in relation to COVID-19, basically. And Vigano responds here in this first section by speaking of Portugal as the land which the Blessed Virgin has promised to preserve in the faith, even in these times of great trial. That's what we see here. So here, Vigano is referring to the words of Our Lady during her July 13th, 1917 apparition, quote, "In Portugal, the dogma of the faith shall always be preserved." So he's already starting to head off into all things Fatima right from the get-go. And he wastes no time. The third part of the message that Our Lady confided to the pastorinos, the shepherds of Fatima, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll call that the second section. Here in this section, we see numerous misstatements of fact or just outright errors. First, Vigano states that the third part of the secret was given to the children, right here to the children, what was it? To deliver to the Holy Father. Para que ellos entregasen ao Santo Padre, I think is how that, forgive my terrible pronunciation in Portuguese. But the English translation is to deliver to the Holy Father, basically. This claim is erroneous because it is unsupported in the historical documentation. Our Lady never indicated that such was her purpose. Moreover, Sister Lucia herself expressed surprise that her text ended up at the Vatican. In 2016, the critical edition of Sister Lucia's memoirs was published by the Sanctuary of Fatima, I think it was. Yeah, published in Fatima. And I was there when they were published by Dr. Cristina Sobral, and they have an appendices at the end in which on page 451, question 161, answer 89, she's asked flat out, had you ever imagined that the third part of the secret could be destined to go to within the Vatican? And she just flat out says, no. Now, in Portuguese, she just flat out says it. No, never crossed her mind. So it's very, very clear. So then Vigano concludes his sentence here with the phrase that the third part remains secret to this day. Let's see. Let me try to find it. Yeah, here it is. It remains secret to this day. Why would Vigano make this claim? Well, if he has agreed with the conclusions of Antonio Socci, as we saw earlier, then it seems that he is referring to the fourth secret hypothesis, this, which is the very namesake of Socci's book. So I think I've already explained what the fourth secret hypothesis is, if I remember correctly. So I'll just kind of leave people to do that generally. But this hypothesis is just, it's by this point, it's basically dead. It's a non-issue. It's a non-starter for a couple of different reasons. Among them being, in 2013, October specifically, a biography of Sister Lucia was published by her religious community, the Carmelite Convent of St. Teresa in Coimbra, Portugal. The biography is entitled Pathway Under the Gaze of Mary, as we would say in English. In Portuguese, Um Caminho sob o Olhar de Maria. And they revealed, the sisters, Carmelite sisters, revealed that there was a meaning, significado is the Portuguese word here, given to Sister Lucia at some unspecified point in time. And this at first seems to vindicate Socci's claims and others who believe that there was an interpretation of the third part of the secret. But there are two reasons why they should not throw a party here. First, while the claim of Socci and others ended up being true that there was an interpretation, that was not the entirety of their argument. They combined that claim with three other allegations. First, that Sister Lucia had written down this interpretation. Second, that Sister Lucia had communicated this document to the Vatican. And three, the Vatican was hiding, allegedly, this second text. So the fourth secret of Fatima hypothesis cannot just be said there was an interpretation with a period at the end of that sentence. It's not that simple. It's much more complicated than that. There are at least these three allegations that are intimately bound up within this hypothesis. So as it turns out, these three assertions or allegations were debunked by the Carmelite sisters' biography with yet another revelation. They revealed that when Our Lady had appeared to Sister Lucia in January of 1944, and Sister Lucia had received a direct mandate from the Virgin herself not to reveal the meaning of the third part of the Secret of Fatima. So therefore, how can there be a text with some explanation allegedly covered up and denied by the Vatican if the Blessed Virgin herself had mandated that no such text was to be written? I defy anybody, not just challenge, I defy anybody to offer a rational explanation that is in keeping with the historical facts. It simply doesn't exist. So on this question of how can such a text be written with this mandate, Vigano gets put into the proverbial hot seat, because unless he is willing to stand on his credentials, as we talked about earlier, and state publicly before all the world that such a document exists, he has seen it as a former Vatican official, then his claim to Dies Irae that the third part of the secret here remains secret to this day is demonstrably false. Demonstrably false. These facts, however, do not stop Archbishop Vigano from continuing to make outlandish statements in the rest of this interview. He also claims that keeping the text unpublished was the result of a conspiracy. He explains that Our Lady, let's see, where is it? Just so I can highlight it. Oh, yes, here it is. He says that Our Lady asked to reveal the third part in 1960, or that it be revealed in 1960. But John the 23rd had a communique published on February 8th of that year, and then it says and with this distance from the message of the Queen of Heaven, a cover-up operation was started. He flat out says it right here. Right here. That is a very bold claim, and unfortunately, the Archbishop is wrong. It is true that there was a text dated to February 8th of 1960. That's a fact. Vigano unfortunately mischaracterizes the document. It was not a communique from John the 23rd. It was a news article from an unnamed reporter who cited anonymous sources at the Vatican. And when you read it, it almost sounds like a Vatican gossip corner circle sort of argument or sort of thing, like he just heard it around the Vatican. So the provenance, therefore, of this news article seems to be less illustrious than how Vigano characterizes it to Dies Irae. There is, though, a more likely reason why the text was not published in 1960 than Vigano's characterization here of a cover-up operation. The third part was not published until the year 2000 because the text was unintelligible in 1960 without the meaning that the Virgin had mandated not to be written. So it was kind of like a handicap. Rome was like, what does this mean? Without an interpretation, publishing the text would have created certain problems that the Church was unwilling to create for herself. Cardinal Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, himself said as much at the time of the text publication. I brought that out in my book on Fatima. On that occasion, Ratzinger was very explicit, and in so many words, what he said was, we didn't have an interpretation. It would have been irresponsible of us to put this before the Church and the world and basically tell everybody have this gigantic free-for-all to interpret it. So without something to guide us, the Church didn't feel as though it was prudent to reveal it. So the Church has been saying this for at least 21 years. There's been no second text with an explanation. So we can see then that Vigano's claim of there being a cover-up operation is a scandalous and unfounded accusation, one that is based upon false information and characterizations. Likewise, Vigano is incorrect when he later states to Dies Irae that the Virgin was gagged. He actually says that. I'm not entirely too sure. Amordaçar, I think, is here. I think that's the word, if I remember my Portuguese correctly. Let me just do my little. Yep, here it is. Amordaçar in Portuguese. So nice thing about the little Google Translate extension. If you need a little quick word, you can just look it up real quick. It's really nice. So the reason why Vigano is incorrect when he says that she was gagged, allegedly, was that the Virgin never ordered the publication of the text. She never said published. Her express order, as I said earlier, was that the text could only be opened, and the Portuguese word, as recorded from Our Lady to Sister Lucia, as recorded by Lucia, was aberto. That's opened, not published. And I looked. There's no connotation of the word aberto with the word published that I could find in any Portuguese dictionary that I was able to look up. And that it was to be read by the Cardinal of Lisbon and Bishop of Lucia, as we said earlier. So does that mean the Virgin gagged herself? Not quite. There's more going on here. So now moving on, in the third, what I call the third section of the interview, there's another factual error, which he begins with. He says, in the year 2000, during the pontificate of John Paul II, the Secretary of State, Cardinal Sedano, presented as the third secret a version, his version. There's a little, the Portuguese grammar here is a little different than how we would say it in English, but he presented his version as the third secret that from some elements appeared clearly incomplete. Clearly incomplete. So in other words, the claim that the interpretation given to the third part of the Secret of Fatima by the Holy See is actually, supposedly, Cardinal Sedano's interpretation. And that's false. That was not Sedano's interpretation. He was the one who stood up in May of 2000 when the Pope was in Portugal for the beatification of Jacinta and Francisco Marto and told everybody that, guess what? If this is what the general nuts and bolts of it is, we're going to publish it here pretty soon. So he was kind of the figurehead of it, the face, if you will, but it was not his interpretation. That especially was characterized by, as his interpretation, or it was popularized, is the better way to put it, by Antonio Socci. After Socci's book was published, however, Cardinal Bertone himself revealed in the year 2000 that the basic interpretation, as published with the text, was made in conjunction with the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. It was not separate from or opposed to the congregation. And this is important because in the literature of by the Fatima Center, they had said, they basically tried to pit or say that the CDF, its competence, not the Secretary of State. While technically true, they were trying to say that the Secretary of State was overreaching, essentially. That was kind of, you can get that from the argument. That's not what's going on here. They're reading conflict where none exists. So it was, moreover, it was plainly stated in May of 2000 by the then spokesman for the Holy See, Dr. Joaquin Navarro-Valls, may he rest in peace, that it was Sedano who made the announcement instead of John Paul II at the time, because the Holy Father was personally involved in the vision. And so we're already seeing a debunking here, even before the narrative gets published, but nobody's paying attention. So these facts debunk these characterizations that spoke of these power struggles within the Vatican that wrested control over an ailing John Paul II. These are the characterizations that you're dealing with from these radical traditionalists. And I'm sorry, I'm going to call it as it is. These radical traditionalists have been putting this stuff out here, and it's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. So Vigano continues to develop his conspiratorial ideas in this article with Dies Irae interview, He states that Cardinal Bertone, as the Secretary of State under Pope Benedict XVI, quote, tried to divert attention to an event of the past, meaning the third part of the secret, and the Holy See's interpretation that the events foretold in the third part now seem to be part of the past. Now, it is true that Vigano, it's his prerogative to question this interpretation, and in charity, we can question some things in charity. That's true. But while it is Vigano's prerogative to question the Holy See's interpretation, one would hope that Vigano would base himself upon a sure foundation. In other words, having the facts all in order. And I'm just not seeing it. I'm not seeing it in this article. Vigano stated that Cardinal Sedano and Bertone intended, quote, to let the people of God believe that the words of the Virgin had nothing to do with the crisis of the Church, and the combination of modernists and Freemasonry contracted behind the scenes at Vatican II. And we see that right here in the text, right here. So here in this text, Vigano is referring to a belief that there were evil schemes by the people that he mentioned in order to influence Vatican II. Now, there's debate about that. I respect that debate. But in the present instance of this cover-up alleged by Vigano, Cardinals Sedano and Bertone advanced the interpretation currently under discussion in order to deceive the faithful about such machinations. So he's attributing malice and malicious intent to Sedano and Bertone. And so from what we've seen thus far, Vigano keeps doing this without sufficient proof. And what he does offer as evidence is erroneous. Moreover, his statement creates a serious question concerning the Second Vatican Council. If groups like the Freemasons and modernist heretics were doing evil at the council, what then would you think of the council and its documents and the Virgin's alleged words that supposedly condemned Vatican II? Did she condemn the council or just some evil machinations surrounding it? You know, granted, we're baffling with some serious issues here, but, you know, on this matter, though, of condemning the council or just machinations behind it or surrounding it, Vigano is not clear. On that question, he's not clear. But what he does successfully do is to create confusion towards the message of Fatima and create distrust of the magisterium of the Church vis-a-vis the council. That's a problem. And it should be noted that Sister Lucia herself, not once, but twice, I'll say it a third time, twice, referred to Vatican II as a holy council. She said this in a letter that she wrote to her friend, Mother Martins, in September of 1970. I have the book here in my office. So if, as Vigano maintains then, that Sister Lucia was commissioned by Our Lady to give a message to the Holy Father that includes a warning concerning Vatican II, why would Sister Lucia refer to the council as being holy if Our Lady condemned it? Clearly, Vigano is adopting a controversial and ultimately unsupportable position. Vigano then begins the fifth section, which is here, with the words, Benedict XVI himself confirmed the actuality of the Virgin's message, even though, according to the interpretation spread by the Vatican, it should be considered complete. Vigano here appears to be referring to a remark made by Pope Benedict XVI in his May 13, 2010 homily when he was in Fatima. And that remark was, quote, we would be mistaken to think that Fatima's prophetic mission is complete, end quote. Vigano's remark, however, is disassociated from the historical record for two reasons. The first reason is that Vigano neglects to mention that Pope Benedict, as Cardinal Ratzinger, the head of the CDF, was a part of the Vatican's interpretation from the year 2000. This omission is notable because in his August 2018 Testimonianza, Vigano was quite favorable towards Pope Benedict and in matters of clerical sex abuse. So we see here Vigano again being favorable towards Benedict, when in fact Benedict would have been part of the problem. So cognitive dissonance here. The second reason is that Vigano contrasts Pope Benedict's remark with the interpretation given by the Holy See as if there is a contradiction or a change. Not quite. It appears that Vigano has interpreted Benedict's 2010 homily as a repudiation from his position outlined in his theological commentary in June of 2000 that accompanied the publication of the text of the third part of Secret of Fatima. This interpretation, however, I argue, is false, as there is no discord between the two statements. Pope Benedict in 2010 was simply making more apparent a distinction, the roots of which were already present in the year 2000. What's this all about? Simply stated, Benedict did not say the prophecies of Fatima were not complete. Rather, he said that the prophetic mission, words mean something, prophetic mission of Fatima was not complete. Prophecies, prophetic mission, those are two different things, two entirely different things. There's some relation, obviously, but difference. So Pope Benedict distinguished between the individual prophecies of Fatima, such as Our Lady's warning about the spread of Russia's errors, from Fatima's overall prophetic mission. And in order to understand what this distinction is all about, we have to turn to some biblical theology on the nature of prophecy, which is outlined in Benedict's commentary from the year 2000. In the biblical understanding of prophecy, it's about revealing the will of God in the present. It has a secondary meaning of the prediction of future events. Most people understand prophecy nowadays in accordance with that second meaning, not the first one, which is very unfortunate, because if you think that way, you're not going to be able to do theology proper here. So moreover, those who reveal the will of God are considered to be prophets. We find such persons all throughout the Old Testament, the last and greatest of which was St. John the Baptist, according to Jesus Christ. So then what Benedict was doing in his homily was he was developing the biblical understanding of prophecy, which he expressly cited in his commentary from the year 2000. He was using the example of the three shepherd children of Fatima as witnesses, or prophets. He was reminding the faithful of their participation through baptism in Christ's mission of priest, prophet, and king. He connected the apparitions of Our Lady at Fatima to this tenet of the deposit of faith to emphasize that we too have access to the same God, and that the three visionaries witnessed and proclaimed. Benedict also wanted to remind us that baptism binds us to do likewise. So his distinction is entirely concordant with the Holy See's interpretation from the year 2000 that the Virgin's message of conversion and penance remains relevant today. That's the connection. What is fair to note is that the distinction made by Benedict in 2010 was not as apparent in the year 2000. That's fair game. I no qualms from me on that. Vigano, however, does not see the text in this way. He perceives the facts according to a hermeneutic of discontinuity and discord that is certainly not the result of a serene and balanced study of the matter. He then states, those who read the third secret who read the third secret said that its content concerns the apostasy of the church, which precisely in the beginning of the 1960s, and which today has reached a stage so evident that it can be recognized by secular observers. That's this text here in Portuguese. End quote. So in response to this assertion, I'd like to reference a statement made by Sister Lucia to Cardinal Alfredo Ottaviani in the 1950s. She stated to His Eminence that the reason for the date of 1960 on the envelopes containing the third part was that it would be, quote, more clear, end quote. A few years later, in June of 1958, and I've been talking about this in my Fatima webinars too, she wrote to Pope Pius XII and wrote to him told him that in the 1960s, communism will attain its high point, o ponto maximo in Portuguese. So from these pieces of evidence, we can see that historical events in the 1960s had a role to play in the fulfillment of the third part of the secret. We can also infer that if the text would be more clear in 1960 at the time of its reading, then it is fair to speculate that events prior to 1960 might also have had a bearing upon the interpretation of the third part of the secret. So the picture painted by these two observations, I have to note this in all fairness, it remains to be worked out by competent scholars. It's a grayer area. It's not entirely too clear here, but I'm not seeing it. It's like Your Eminence or Excellency. Like, what are you trying to say here? Like, what's going on? You know, it just doesn't. Things don't add up. I hate to say they just don't add up. So before he goes on to talk about the Amazon Synod and all that other stuff, but for our purposes here, what he says here in Dies Irae, it indicates a lack of knowledge as well as a critical study of the history of the third part of the Secret of Fatima. And I think that there are two reasons for this. Vigano's personal and widely known antipathy for Cardinals Sodano and Bertone, which predisposes him to think what radical traditionalists have said about them in relation to Fatima. And the second one is Vigano's belief that Antonio Socci is a reliable source on Fatima. He did some good things. I readily hand him that. But he didn't go deep enough, and that's part of the problem. So with respect to that first reason, characterizing Sodano and Bertone as having malicious intent with the third part of the Secret of Fatima is contrary to the historical record. I acknowledge that Vigano's public accusation of their malfeasance in handling sex abuse cases is serious, if true. And I'm not trying to cast aspersions when I say that. I wasn't there. I don't know. It does not necessarily follow, however, that their actions with Fatima are malicious. In order to discern their actions towards Fatima, one must look to the historical and theological facts. And those facts support, as well as question, the Cardinal's various assertions. But the facts do not prove that there was malice. That's the point that I'm trying to drive at. The facts are there. They don't prove malice. Maybe their individual private interpretations can be questioned in some areas, but that's not the same as equaling malice. And so I think that instead of depending upon people like Socci and some of these other people that have been advancing these conspiracy theories for many years, I think that our efforts are better spent on understanding the third part of the Secret of Fatima more deeply through common serene study and reflection, especially with any new documentation. Hence why I'm offering this 6-part Fatima webinar series, So I think Vigano is just not in possession of all the facts, and he depends upon erroneous research in order to inform his opinions. And because of his status as a former papal nuncio, and he's viewed as being a hero to many people for his publication, stepping out and saying all of these terrible things I'm witness to, it's a cluster bomb of many, many bad things, and it's waiting to go off. But the problem with this is people are also receiving false information and impressions about the authentic message of Our Lady of Fatima, and thus that the message is being harmed. And considering everything, I think Vigano is facing a grave personal danger. He's making scandalous statements, and in doing so, he is in effect undermining his credibility by allowing his personal antipathy to influence his perspective of Our Lady's message at Fatima. And I want to reveal something. This is an exclusive to your program. I know 2 people who know Vigano personally and can get a hold of him. Before I published the article in my essay with Lugano, I was trying to get a hold of His Excellency, and I was able to do so through these contacts. Unfortunately, His Excellency did not, how should I say this? He did not take me seriously. I hate to say it, but I'm going to say it. I essentially, as far as I understand it, I was blown off, not taken seriously. Somebody did get to him. I saw some correspondence from Vigano to this contact. I sent a copy of the essay telling him I won't publish this because I wanted to keep it private. But he never responded after that. As far as I know, he got the essay, but I never heard back from him. And I'm like, okay, then I have to hit this. have to run with it. I have to put this out in print because you're making scandalous statements in the public. So this is a public matter. And I didn't want to do it, but I felt compelled because he was misleading people on Fatima. And it wasn't right. And then he doubled down 2 months later after Dies Irae in another interview, this time with LifeSite News. Let me pull it up here for everybody. Now here he was more or less talking about another alleged private revelation called Civitavecchia. I must leave people to do their own research on that because I don't want to belabor the point. Our time, we have limited time remaining, and so I don't want to burden enough already big thing here. But basically, he connects Fatima in this article with Civitavecchia. And the reason why is because it is said that one of the so-called visionaries of the Civitavecchia case, Jessica Gregori, was allegedly given to know the meaning of the third part of the Secret of Fatima in the mid-90s by Our Lady herself. So Our Lady allegedly told the third part of the secret's meaning to Jessica Gregori. Vigano in this article also recounts a story that Jessica and some other people went to Sister Lucia's convent in Coimbra, Portugal, on June 15th, 1996. And they attended Mass together, as the story says, and they were able to speak to the sisters, the Carmelite sisters, afterwards in the parlor through the grill. And supposedly, the visionary of Civitavecchia, or one of them, Jessica, was able to speak with Sister Lucia privately for a few minutes through this grill. And I've seen the grill, by the way. I've been to Coimbra. So let me just pull all this down here so people can just have it if they want to. Yeah, here's when he starts talking about it. So these things are, in essence, Vigano's presentation with respect to Fatima and Civitavecchia. So I had some problems here, but first let me state that I'm not well versed in the Civitavecchia case, so I make no judgment upon the Civitavecchia case itself. Its specifics I leave to informed scholars. But despite my lack of knowledge on Civitavecchia proper, on the details of this case, that fact does not prohibit me from asking questions for clarification based upon the information presented in the LifeSite News interview. And then I'd also say that my questioning of Archbishop Vigano in relation to Fatima is solely for the sake of clarifying matters on Fatima. I'm not looking to hit the card, hit his excellency, I'm not, look, this is not a hit job. It's not that at all. It's not that. It's about clarifying matters on Fatima. So one of the things we see Vigano returning to the question of Bertone and Fatima. I'm not entirely too sure. Oh yeah, here it is. Vigano claims that Bertone made an astonishing declaration during a press conference on the Third Secret held in April of 2000. Let me pull that up here. Sometimes did they edit it? No, they couldn't have edited it. Let's do the old-fashioned tried and true trick. Yes, here we go. Okay. Whew, all right, I thought they edited it for a second. A press conference on Third Secret held in April of 2000. You see right there. If Vigano was talking about the press conference that introduced the text of the third part of the Secret, that conference wasn't in April of 2000. It was June 26, 2000. So Vigano had the wrong date. He's factually wrong here. He then says that this astonishing declaration ended with Bertone saying that, quote, the Third Secret has nothing to do with the apostasy linked to the Council, the Novus Ordo of the Mass, and the conciliar popes as the integrists have claimed for decades. Well, there's a problem here. Bertone never said that. during the June 26, 2000 conference. I don't know if he said it elsewhere, but he didn't say it in during that conference. And we can say that now because I have a copy. My book is the first book to come out that has a full transcript of the questions and answers of that press conference that had previously been unreleased even by the Vatican. And there's nothing in that question and answer that talks about this. I looked it over, and it just doesn't exist. And that's a problem. So again, we're seeing more and more problems here. So then moving on then to what Vigano says about Civitavecchia in relation to Fatima, he takes care to note his sources. He states to LifeSite News that he personally knows the Gregori family. He had been introduced to them in the late 1990s through the now Bishop Giovanni de Ercole of Ascoli Piceno, who had worked with Vigano in the Secretariat of State in the Vatican. And this knowledge is helpful because it provides some certitude as to the sources of Vigano's information or presentation. He also references a book written by a Father Flavio Ubodi called Civitavecchia, 25 Years with Mary. I think we saw that earlier. I'd have to do another word search to come to it quickly, but yeah, why don't we do that? Yeah, here it is. And so allegedly, Father Ubodi claims in this book that he received an account of the trip to Coimbra by the Gregori family from the family's spiritual director, Father Manuel Hernandez Jerez. And a quotation from the book is provided here in the article, the interview, with Vigano. And at the end of this quotation, Father Jerez states that Jessica and Sister Lucia spoke privately, but that he did not know what they discussed. So here we see that here. I heard nothing of what they said to each other. So we note these facts, and so we have to. I want to ask two questions. How much of Vigano's discourse is from his personal knowledge of the case of Civitavecchia? And second, what critical examination of the claims of the Gregori family, both with their respect to their alleged revelations, as well as the subsequent story about the trip to Coimbra, has Vigano performed? This conversation between Jessica and Sister Lucia, Vigano does not state what the two women discussed. Not even Father Jerez says that he knows that. The alleged specifics of that conversation are discussed by the interviewer, Dr. Maika Hickson, I think that's how you say her name, in an editorial summary at the beginning of the LifeSite News interview. So if we scroll all the way up, she flat out, it is important to know that Jessica Gregori, the daughter of the family who witnessed these apparitions and supernatural events, was given by Our Lady the content of the third secret of Fatima, and that this message was passed on to Pope John Paul II at the time. She herself was able to meet in 1996 with Sister Lucia of Fatima and to compare with her the messages they received concerning the third secret. They matched. Let's find that. Here they go. Right here, this paragraph. So then after this statement, Dr. Hickson referenced Father Ubodi's book and also an interview that Father Ubodi gave on May 15, 2020 to the publication The Daily Compass. When you go and read that interview, Father Ubodi relates that he spoke to Jessica Gregori about the trip to Coimbra. And he says that Jessica herself told him that she spoke privately with Sister Lucia and that they compared the messages of the Blessed Mother and they matched perfectly. That's what she claims to him. If this story is true, and I do not doubt Father Ubodi's sincerity in relating what he asked her, I have some questions. First, in what language did Jessica and Sister Lucia conversate? Second, will Jessica disclose the specific content of that alleged conversation? If not, why? Third, has Jessica herself specifically stated on record that she cannot reveal the content of that conversation with Sister Lucia? Fourth, Has Jessica herself given a general summary of the topic or topics about which they spoke? Fifth, has Jessica herself verified that Sister Lucia specifically revealed to Jessica the content, the meaning, or both of the third part of the Secret of Fatima as given to her allegedly by Our Lady? Sixth, for what reason did Sister Lucia allegedly speak openly with Jessica about the third part of the secret? And seventh, when did Jessica begin to assert that the content of her conversation with Sister Lucia included the exchange of their respective understandings of the third part of the secret? All 7 of these questions have a specific theological or anthropological goal in mind. So depending upon their answers, I want to make some observations now. The first observation is that the third part of the Secret of Fatima was, as of 1996, still not published. The second is both Sister Lucia and Pope John Paul II discussed in 1982 the opportuneness of revealing the third part. The Holy Father deemed it inopportune at that time, and Sister Lucia agreed with him. The third observation is Sister Lucia always maintained a discreet silence about the third part of the secret. She was more open about it with the Holy Father, John Paul II especially, in private, but there is nothing in the available historical record about her being so open about the subject to the average layperson. And it is a well-known fact that Sister Lucia would not discuss this topic without having received permission from the Holy See. A fourth observation is Sister Lucia's humility and obedience as a religious are very well established. For example, in order to seal the envelopes containing the third part of the Secret of Fatima, I think I've shown these before on the show, but it bears seeing again, Sister Lucia wouldn't use wax that had been thrown away in a trash can without her superior's permission. And this is the things it looks like. So if the Holy Father did not want the content of the third part of the secret known to the public, there is reason to believe that Sister Lucia would obey him to the letter. Fifth, related to the previous point about Sister Lucia's obedience, she had been commanded by Our Lady in 1944 not to reveal the meaning of the third part. And remember, not even the written description was available yet in 1996. So we can see that there are some difficulties then. I mean, these are all observations. These are the historical record, established facts. And so there are difficulties, notable difficulties, I might add, about the claim from Jessica that her and Sister Lucia somehow exchanged understandings of the third part of the Secret of Fatima. It simply doesn't fit the profile of what the historical record tells us. It just doesn't fit. I mean, it's end of story. I mean, even right down to that question, in what language did they conversate in? Does Jessica know Portuguese? Sister Lucia did not speak Italian. So there are some anthropological facts that have to be addressed here, as well as theological. So what I want to, so I offer some some thoughts. Jessica Gregori is now a grown woman. Back then in the 90s, she was a child. Archbishop Vigano, through LifeSite News, has now made her case with Civitavecchia more prominent in the English-speaking world. Jessica needs to be asked some tough questions, such as the ones that I've outlined here, given here. And she needs to give an absolute affirmation that Father Abodi's assertion to the Daily Compass about the exchanging understandings claim is true. That's just, I mean, she needs to do that. She needs to do that. It's important. It comes across to be very, very clearly that Vigano is basing himself upon some very sketchy information, some of which is just demonstrably false. Others it's questionable. Others it's like, where are you getting this from? I've spoken at great length. I've kind of just dumped an awful lot. If people want to talk or ask questions, or maybe you have some questions, I would probably be a good time to do it. Like I said, I've spoken an awful lot.
see some that were sent a little bit earlier. There was a really good one from Michael earlier. Here it is. I think that may be part 2, though. Let me scroll back up. There it is. Any examples of tangible evidence Vigano has provided to support some of his more conspiratorial claims of late, as fair to him as possible, where has been proven to be correct? Where has he been proven to be correct?
Provided to some of his more conspiratorial claims of late. I have to stand on the purpose of today's show and say that I'm here to discuss Fatima and not like things on his stuff with like the Great Reset or some of these other claims. That's a whole other ball of wax. I think we can ask questions about these sorts of things, but matters of state and diplomacy are much more to his competency than I think he is on Fatima. So I regret to do so, but I must decline to answer the question, not because I don't want to, but because that's a bit far afield of what I'm able to do. If you want to maybe ask again, maybe some more of the specifics, because your question is kind of broad. If there's something more specific that he said of late, maybe I can say something about that.
And y'all make sure to send them to @Reason and Theology. I'm seeing some comments, but I'm looking for specific questions. Again, go ahead and put them in right now. Send it to @Reason and Theology.
I see Suburban Banshees. Do you think that mistranslation of Portuguese Fatima material has led people astray? That and the fact that we lack some good resources in the English language from Europe, specifically Portugal. Yeah, I think there are some mistranslation issues that come up. Yeah, either from Portuguese direct or either through some of the other translations. Yeah, that has been an issue that I have noticed. Yes.
Xavier asks, if the third secret has been fully revealed, why was only John Paul II shot? I know it's a little off topic, but I don't know if you want to grab that. The vision included JP2 alone shot with a bullet, not a bishop, and others shot with arrows.
If it's been fully revealed, why was only John Paul II shot? Well, remember I said earlier that the third part of the Secret of Fatima is about people dying for the sake of Jesus Christ. And I addressed this in one of the early Fatima webinars that I've been doing. The vision is not about John Paul II. It's not. It is about a whole history of popes and people undergoing a persecution brought on by the errors of Russia having spread. So everybody kind of focuses on the Pope being shot, and they think that they kind of put these blinders up. They only see it in those terms. But not even the Vatican has said that that's the correct interpretation. The Vatican itself has not said that. They talk about a whole century of evil that culminates, or culminated, culminato in Italian, in the assassination attempt on John Paul II's life. But there's much more to it than just the Pope being shot. And that's what I am partly trying to do with saying we need to go deeper into these matters and some of these questions. What you raise is fair. I mean, I stand with you. It's a fair question to ask. I would tweak it to say something like, well, you know, if a JP2 shot and he lived, you know, how do we reconcile that? Well, you know, there are some who do believe that John Paul II, that he's the wrong pope to think about having been shot and killed. There are those who believe that was, and this is a legitimate debate, that there are some who believe that prophecy is fulfilled in John Paul I. As a matter of fact, you had Father Murr, you had Father Murr on a couple of months ago. He's working on a new book in which he's going to talk a little bit more about what he knows about the death of John Paul I. So more on that later. So like I said, it's a debate, but if you subscribe to that theory, you have to believe that John Paul II was murdered. That should be the first, was murdered. You'd have to believe that for that interpretation to be true. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying that there is some discussion upon this, and if it's kept within certain bounds, I think it would be fair to look at some of that, but not on the internet. Not on the internet, because people just get involved in that blood sporting, and they dogmatize it, and they get nasty and ugly and vicious, and it's not charitable. So if you're going to discuss it, I say keep it off the internet and keep it classy. This isn't a bar fight. Let's have some class. If I may borrow from a certain program that shall remain nameless, because people will probably be upset at me. What the heck? It's Castlevania. When Trevor Belmont is fighting Alucard, and Trevor does a cheap shot during the fight, and Alucard goes, "This isn't a bar fight. Have some class." I grew up playing video games, Castlevania being one of them. So
I remember Castlevania on Nintendo, but I don't remember what you're talking about.
Alucard and Trevor were Castlevania 3, but now they've made it into an actual, I don't want to say anime, but it's animation, an animated Castlevania, the animated series. And I think it was in season 1 where they two get together and they have this fight, and Trevor kicks him in a certain area, and Alucard's like, "This isn't a bar fight. Have some class."
Benjamin sends a super chat. Castlevania reference support. Thank you for that. That's awesome.
Yeah, there you go. See, yeah, I've actually been thinking of doing some gaming there on my own YouTube channel. I was like, nah. Oh yeah, I loved playing Final Fantasy and Legend of Zelda. Oh,
Zelda is where it's at.
Yeah.
I've beaten a lot of the Zelda games. I can tell you a lot about them.
I am very interested to see what the heck happened to Link's arm in Breath of the Wild 2. There was this awesome
Breath of
theory.
the Wild 2 hasn't been released. What are you talking about?
Well, they released the trailer. It's coming out.
I've seen the trailer, but what's wrong with his arm?
Malice goes up his arm. Ganon's Malice goes up his arm.
Yeah.
And there's a really intriguing theory. I've watched it, and this guy, like when they showed him they showed what everybody believes to be mummified Ganon, and this arm is holding in place. Everybody thinks that arm was like part of the Zelda's seal or something, or something that was. And it's like, no, actually, this one guy had this really awesome theory about in fact, Ganon engaged in dark magic, and he's now turned into a leech, and that hand is part of the magic that allows him to be that way. And I'm saying, I watched this. It was like a 20 to half minute video, and I'm like, this is fascinating. This guy really had some depth to it. I was like, I'm very impressed.
We'll find out hopefully soon. Although we have to issue an anathema sit to Kyle Marks, who says that Breath of the Wild was horrible. I don't know what he's talking about. I liked Breath of the Wild. I would definitely not say it's horrible. I like it even more than Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. So I think it's probably the best one out there.
Yeah. Real quick. Well, even Cicero said you need a moment of levity, and we've had some pretty serious stuff. So this is a good moment of levity. But Xavier asks, a little off topic and not sure if you've touched on it, but what are your thoughts on the fake Sister Lucia theory that some city vacantes proposed? It's nonsense. We've talked about it before. I don't even like talking about it because it's a sideshow, freak show, and anybody supporting that theory that needs to have their head examined. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I said it. There it is. It's preposterous because even Sister her niece is still alive. Her niece is like 101 years old, something like that. She's still alive, and she knew her aunt before Sister Lucia transferred to the convent in Carmel in 1948, and the niece has never said any of this nonsense.
Like, Kevin, don't you understand that they have her silenced? Right? They're preventing her from telling us the truth.
Oh, it gets worse. Some of these things that the vacantists are proposing are just absolutely absurd.
I've heard that there's 2 Paul VI as well.
Well, yeah, that's the Bayside theory, and Father Murr and Mother Pascalina talked about that in Father Murr's book, The Godmother. It's a great book. It's one of the best books I've read in a very, 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 very long time. If I had to label the top 10 books that I've read as a Catholic, Father Murr's book is in the top 5. I'd have to say. But yeah, it's nonsense. It's all nonsense. Mother Pascalina nailed it. She said people come up with these theories in order to help them to cope. Now I'm paraphrasing what's in the book,
Right.
but they're doing it to help them to cope. Okay,
I've been saying the same thing. Yep.
Like I want to even say this much. Recently, Father Benedict Anderson gave an interview to The Pillar and J.D. Flynn, talking about some very serious things that have happened over in Silverstream Priory, a Benedictine monastery, traditionalist Benedictine monastery in Stamullen, Ireland. And it was very, very serious accusations that he has made. And this ties into Fatima and Vigano, because Vigano was getting involved with that particular monastery. They published a book called Insinu Jesu, which has taken a lot of the world by storm, the Catholic world, in the past 5 years. Even a good close priest friend of mine, he says beautiful reflections on the Eucharist. But the person who wrote it, Father Mark Kirby, claims to have locutions, received private revelations, and that this book is based upon those, among other things. I don't believe it. I have never believed it. And so when I saw that Vigano was being introduced to Insinu Jesu, I wrote to one of my contacts and I said, no, please, no. And I got the emails, I can show you. I've been sounding the alarm bells on Kirby for the past 9 years. I've known for 9 years that there was something not quite right there. And Father Benedict, I believe wholeheartedly, is telling the truth. But this is the thing that let me tie this back. I say this because Vigano has put himself in a very dangerous position of being taken advantage of by people who want to use his good name. And I hope he's not writing checks that he can't cash, so to speak. Not literal checks, from a bank account, but I mean, of his moral authority. I tried to warn him and say, when I was trying to contact him last year, I was like, I think that I would like to talk to you, Your Excellency, because you need to know that people are taking advantage of you, I'm concerned for you, And like I said, he blew me off. But I was able to at least talk to one of the people that knows him and give him the heads up about the Father Kirby situation. But this is what's happening. Vigano was supposed to go away. He was supposed to ride off into the sunset, go into hiding, and hardly anybody was supposed to be able to know how to find him. And he keeps talking. Like every month, it seems like he's coming out with something new, And it's dangerous. And I feel bad. It's like, Your Excellency, what are you doing? So people are looking to cope. And I feel bad because they're looking for leadership. I think whatever Vigano witnessed must have been awfully horrific, because he's not in a good frame of mind. I'm sorry. I'm just not seeing it. He's coming across more and more as time goes on as the crazy uncle, that everybody's like just humors, Some people may take seriously, but other people may just humor him. And he got awfully close with that Silverstream Priory story. And then I intervened on that one privately. Yes, I'm declaring this on your show. I intervened privately on that one 2 years ago last month. And I hoped I kind of stemmed the tide on that one. I hadn't seen Vigano talk too much about that ever since. So when we hear about these things, it's very destructive, but people, we're in the middle of a very serious passion and trial of the church right now, and people are desperate. They're looking for leadership, or something to explain the malaise that we see around us. And they're turning to some of these wacko-jacko conspiracy theories, like the imposter sister Lucia theory. What was it, about a month and a half ago? We had that one program where we talked about the supplied rites, with those priests. I want. Can I send a little shot across the bow with that?
Yeah, go ahead.
One of them said something very nasty publicly on their Twitter feed the other day about somebody that I went to school with at Franciscan University. It was very unbecoming what this person said. Really, both sides, I guess. They shouldn't be engaged in any flame wars anyway, but especially of a priest. And And I want to say to that priest, if you're watching this, those who live in glass houses ought not throw stones. And I'm dead serious about that. Don't throw stones when you live in a glass house. And I'll also reveal your chancery office knows about you. So, you know, people are following these guys, and they're crazy. They're crazy. But my heart goes out to the average rank and file Catholic, because they're starving for leadership, and they're going for these horrible conspiracy ideas, you know, and theories. Some of it is not conspiracy theory. Some of it is conspiracy fact, like actual conspiracy. I agree. There's been conspiracies all throughout. When I was teaching history and Latin, I used to tell my students what the famous, what was it? Not Domitian. I can't remember. One of the Roman emperors, right on the end of the first century, said, "Nobody believes in a conspiracy against the emperor until it succeeds." You know. So yeah, you know, people are twisting Fatima into something that it's not, and they're not doing justice. They think they are. That's the sad part. They think they are doing justice to Fatima. They really do. They think that they're telling the real truth of what Our Lady had said. They don't even know the first thing about it. You know, I'll never forget when I was debating Christopher Ferrara in the Angelus press conference in 2017, and he actually cast aspersions upon a group of the Carmelite Sisters of Coimbra. And I wrote about this as already public knowledge, you know. That was just so wrong. But this is what people have reduced themselves to. Street fights. And attacking innocent nuns, contemplative nuns, who have no ability really to defend themselves in the public forum. That was despicable. And I say that word seriously. That was despicable. And I called him out on it. You know, that, and also his being very disingenuous during the debate, saying that I was avoiding the phrase in the fourth memoir, Sister Lucia, about the in Portugal, the dogma of the faith shall always be preserved. Chapter 9 of my book is all about that. I'm one of the very few people in English, in the English-speaking world, that actually addresses that topic from a critical scholarly perspective, examining the texts, what was said. So it was very questionable for him to sit there and make that statement. But this is what we're dealing with. You know, people want to get involved in street fights instead of keeping it actually elevated and in charity. I know we've talked about this before, even tonight, but, you know, it's sad. And a lot of people, they just want to be entertained. Like that famous scene in the movie Gladiator. Are you not entertained? You know, have you seen Gladiator?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
People just want to be entertained. They're not really into truth. They just want to be entertained. You know.
Well,
and
you know,
a lot of people. I mean, not everybody, but maybe I shouldn't overly broad, keep my point broad. But you know, I
think you said it when you mentioned that they're looking for something to help them cope with the crisis in the church today. And I've said before, this is why people get really emotional and angry with me. And I think even by extension with some of the things that you're saying and others who have been on the show, because we take away their safety blanket, their coping mechanism, and they don't know what to do at that point. They start, flailing and going crazy and getting emotional because you take away their coping mechanism. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle the crisis and still remain a Catholic. So it makes them really uncomfortable and they get emotional. That's been my observation.
Yeah, I was just reading, what was it? The Didache of the Epistle of Barnabas earlier. It's out in my living room. I don't have it here right in front of me. I didn't think I'd need it right now, but they make a really good point about how we're going to live in bad times. It actually says it. So there will be bad times, but we have to keep, I forget what I think, I want to say the Didache. We have to keep certain things before us, wisdom and charity being very high on that list, but being virtuous. I'll keep it simple, just simply. We need to be virtuous. We need to hold the faith, maintain the faith in the midst of whatever evil comes in any given generation. We talk about coping. I'm also partial to the expression the security blanket. People don't want to talk about my book on Fatima within the traditionalist world, at least many of them, because not necessarily, there are good people. I mean, Dr. Joseph Shaw, for instance, he actually had the guts to endorse the book. This is the guy who was the spokesman for the Correctio Filialis with Pope Francis a few years ago. Shaw is a gentleman and a scholar. He had the guts to actually do that. So, not everybody, of course, I can't paint everybody in this, in these lights, but, in a bad way, but, not that I want to paint everybody in a bad way, but you know what I mean? But the people act like it doesn't exist. They don't talk about it. They're still touting these things. And I hate to say it because Peter Kwasniewski is a friend of mine, but even what Peter said in his review of Donald Foley's book on Medjugorje, I read that last night or yesterday, and that actually really grieved me. I was talking to a priest friend of mine. I said, I'm actually really grieved by that. I kind of felt as though Peter just threw that in my face. I mean, we've talked about this stuff. We had a meeting at a restaurant in Wausau, Wisconsin, in December of 2018, and it grieved me. I was like, I guess I now know where I stand. Like, you don't even reference my book in this article, or something that, that there's. I mean, he did say that there's not totally a consensus. I mean, I guess there's something to be said for that in a positive way, but it was buried under all of this fourth secret or all this conspiracy stuff. And I'm like, why are you doing that?
I think that they're grasping at straws and looking for something to support their position today. And I think it's exactly that, grasping at straws.
Yeah. Were there any other questions? I
think that's it. No, it's going to be it. We're an hour and a half in, and I got to head out here in a minute anyway. So I appreciate you doing this. Let's continue to have these videos. Love having you on, and willing to do it again. And, any topic that you want, let's do it.
All right. Yeah, I think the next one is the Fatima one, right? The Fatima webinar, right? I think it was like around the 24th or the 26th, somewhere into there, I think it was. I have it written down in my book, but.
Yeah, it is on the... pulling it up here. 21st.
Oh, 21st. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
21st. Yeah, I have to give a quick disclaimer. I go to Boston to help settle my brother's belongings and whatnot. And so I have asked people for about a month after I come back. I just need some time to myself. So I've committed to do the webinar, and that's still a thing. But I just want to give everybody the heads up. There will be another video again. I just made it today and rendered it. So it's all got the pictures, all the cool graphics and all that cool stuff. But please don't hesitate to ask questions and whatnot. But I'm envisioning maybe a shorter webinar for that. The video itself is somewhere about 12 minutes long or so. And we're going to start getting to some meaty stuff. The 5th and 6th webinars, we're going out with a bang. So, it's going to get some good stuff. But you might not see it at the total top of my game, as it were.
That's all right. I look forward to it. 21st, 6 p.m. Central. Y'all stay tuned for that. You'll see a link coming up pretty soon. Be sure to check it out. And everybody, thank you, of course, for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Definitely hit that like button. Let us know your comments in the comment section. And also check us out, patreon.com/Reason and Theology, if you want to support us. And also you'll get access to extra content. That'll do it. God bless you all.